Jeremy savored the rare comfort of an early evening, fluffing his pillows as snowflakes whispered promises of a coming storm. The cold outside was relentless, but inside, the old man found solace in the warmth of his bed. Just as he was about to settle in, the doorbell shattered the peace. Startled, he shuffled downstairs, muttering about unexpected visitors at this hour. Opening the door, he found his young neighbor, her face pale and etched with worry. "Mr. Rogers, there's a dog in your backyard. It must be freezing," she said urgently. Jeremy, confused, nodded and promised to check. Pulling on his thick coat, scarf, and gloves, he braced himself against the biting cold. He spotted the dog, curled tightly by the fence, its fur matted and blending into the icy ground. Jeremy moved cautiously, his heart heavy with concern. As he approached, the dog's head snapped up, its wild eyes locking on his. A deep growl rumbled from its chest, freezing Jeremy in place. Jeremy spoke gently, trying to soothe it. "Easy there. I'm not here to hurt you." Slowly, the dog shifted, revealing something beneath its belly. Jeremy's pulse quickened as faint, strange sounds reached his ears. His first thought was kittens. Startled, he rushed back inside, grabbing his laptop to search for advice. But something about the muffled sounds nagged at him. They didn't quite match. What was the dog protecting? Jeremy knew time was running out. The storm was worsening, and whatever lay beneath the dog wouldn't survive the night. Determined, he began devising a plan to save them both. Jeremy paced the room, racking his brain for a way to approach the dog safely. He couldn't risk a bite, but he couldn't leave it out in the storm either. Bundling up in extra layers and thick gardening gloves, he prepared himself for another attempt. This time he carried a bag of sausages, hoping the enticing smell might lure the dog away from whatever it was guarding. Outside, the wind howled and snow swirled relentlessly. Jeremy moved cautiously, placing the first sausage within the dog's reach. The warm, savory scent drifted through the freezing air. The dog's nose twitched, but it remained firmly rooted, its protective instincts unyielding. Undeterred, Jeremy laid a trail of sausages, each piece leading closer to the shed. With every step, his heart pounded, the cold biting into his resolve. Retreating to his window, Jeremy watched anxiously as the dog hesitated. It sniffed the air again, then cautiously took a step forward. Hunger overcame its caution as it began eating the sausages, inching toward the shed. Jeremy's breath caught as the dog finally crossed the threshold. He rushed outside and quickly shut the shed door behind it, shielding the dog from the storm. Relief flooded him, but his attention quickly turned to the spot the dog had so fiercely guarded. As the snow continued to fall, Jeremy knelt and brushed aside the icy layer, uncovering the source of the faint, strange sounds. His heart nearly stopped. Beneath the dog had been two tiny owlets, their downy feathers fluffed against the cold, their wide eyes staring up at him in silent plea. Carefully, Jeremy scooped the fragile creatures into a warm blanket and hurried them inside. He placed them in a cozy box near the fireplace, where the warmth would help them recover. But his relief was short-lived. His thoughts quickly turned to the dog. It had looked so frail, its body trembling with exhaustion. Jeremy returned to the shed, finding the dog slumped on the floor. Its breathing was shallow, its once alert eyes half closed. The dog had clearly sacrificed everything to protect the owlets. Jeremy's heart ached as he realized the animal was on the brink of collapse. He couldn't let the dog die after such bravery. Gathering his strength, Jeremy lifted the frail animal into his arms and carried it into the warmth of his home. Inside, Jeremy gently laid the dog near the fireplace, wrapping it in a thick blanket. The warmth of the fire filled the room, but it seemed to do little for the dog. Its breathing remained shallow, its frail body unresponsive. Jeremy's heart sank as he watched the once protective animal struggle to hold on. He couldn't bear the thought of it dying, not after everything it had done for the owlets. Pacing the room, Jeremy racked his brain for a solution. The animal shelter had already told him they couldn't send help in the storm. Time was running out. Gripping his phone with trembling hands, Jeremy called his friend, the local vet. "You have to help me," he pleaded, his voice thick with urgency. The vet, recognizing the gravity of the situation, agreed without hesitation. "Bring the dog in, Jeremy. I'll get everything ready." Determined to save the dog, Jeremy bundled it tightly in the blanket and prepared for the treacherous drive. The storm raged outside, snow piling high as fierce winds whipped through the dark night. Jeremy carefully secured the owlets in another blanket, placing them on the passenger seat alongside the dog. The journey to the vet's office was perilous. Icy roads and poor visibility made every turn feel like a gamble. Jeremy gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart pounding as the truck skidded slightly on the frozen road. He glanced at the dog, its breaths shallow and irregular, a stark reminder of how fragile the situation was. Pushing forward despite the danger, Jeremy's resolve carried him through the relentless storm. Finally, the faint glow of the vet's office appeared through the swirling snow. Jeremy exhaled a shaky breath as he pulled into the lot and carried the dog inside. The vet was ready and waiting, immediately taking the dog to the back for emergency care. Jeremy stayed in the waiting room, the owlets nestled securely in their blanket. Hours passed, each moment stretching unbearably as Jeremy sat in silence. When the vet finally emerged, his face bore a reassuring smile. "Jeremy, you did something extraordinary," he said. "The dog is stable now. If you hadn't acted when you did, it wouldn't have survived." Relief washed over Jeremy, his shoulders sagging as the tension eased. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice heavy with gratitude. The vet explained how severe the dog's condition had been. It was malnourished, exhausted, and suffering from hypothermia. Yet, despite its frailty, the dog had shown incredible resilience. Jeremy told the vet about the owlets and the dog's protective behavior, marveling at its bravery. The vet nodded in admiration and checked on the owlets, confirming that they were recovering well and would be transported to a wildlife sanctuary. They would receive the care they needed to grow strong and eventually return to the wild. As the storm outside subsided, Jeremy felt a wave of exhaustion hit him. He headed home, the events of the night weighing on him. His once empty house, cold and silent, now felt warmer. The dog's selflessness and the owlet's fragility had stirred something deep within him, a purpose he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Jeremy's first thought was of the dog and the owlets. He dressed quickly, eager to see how they were faring. The roads were still blanketed in snow, but much safer now that the storm had passed. Arriving at the vet's office, Jeremy's heart lifted when he saw the dog awake, its eyes brighter than the night before. As soon as the dog spotted him, its tail wagged weakly and it struggled to its feet, padding over to Jeremy. Overwhelmed, Jeremy knelt down and gently stroked its head. The dog leaned into him, a soft whimper escaping its lips as if expressing its gratitude. Jeremy's eyes misted as he realized the depth of the bond forming between them. Over the following days, Jeremy visited the vet's office regularly, checking on the dog as it regained its strength. Each visit deepened their connection. The dog, whom Jeremy named Scout, in tribute to its vigilant spirit, had become a symbol of courage and loyalty. Jeremy, who had spent so many years in solitude, felt his heart opening in ways he hadn't thought possible. As Scout grew stronger, Jeremy made a decision. He couldn't let the dog go. It had become a part of his life in such a profound way. With the vet's encouragement, Jeremy signed the adoption papers and brought Scout home. Scout settled into Jeremy's home as though it had always belonged there. The once quiet house now felt alive with the warmth of companionship. Scout followed Jeremy everywhere, its tail wagging eagerly, and the two quickly became inseparable. The dog's bravery had touched Jeremy deeply, and its gentle, loyal nature brought a sense of purpose to his days. Jeremy found joy in the simplest moments, taking Scout on walks through the snow-dusted streets, sharing quiet evenings by the fireplace, and watching the dog grow healthier and more vibrant each day. Scout had filled the emptiness that Jeremy had long accepted as part of his life, bringing light and warmth into the old man's heart. Meanwhile, The owlets were thriving under the care of the wildlife sanctuary. Jeremy occasionally received updates, learning that they were growing stronger and would soon be ready to return to the wild. Knowing they would have a chance to live their lives thanks to Scout's protective instincts filled Jeremy with pride. The snowstorm that had once seemed like an impending threat had brought unexpected blessings into Jeremy's life. It reminded him of the power of compassion and the beauty of forming connections, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Scout had not only saved the owlets but had also rescued Jeremy from his isolation. As the weeks passed, Jeremy and Scout's bond grew deeper. Scout became more than just a companion. It was family. Jeremy, who had once been reluctant to open his heart again, now found himself filled with gratitude for the dog that had braved the storm to protect others. One evening, as Jeremy sat by the fire with Scout curled at his feet, he reflected on how much his life had changed. The storm had been fierce, but it had brought with it a loyal friend, a renewed sense of purpose, and a reminder of life's unexpected joys. Jeremy smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. Scout stirred, looking up at him with trusting eyes, and Jeremy leaned down to scratch behind its ears. "Good boy, Scout," he murmured softly. The dog's tail thumped against the floor, a quiet but powerful affirmation of the bond they shared.